Very good morning. So, today we are going to conduct our panel discussion on the topic of minimum wage. Is it a boon or a bane? So, the discussion of today revolves around a very contested topic that is minimum wage. A lot of people has been discussing it recently, and the media too has given their inputs. Our panel discussion today consists of three members. First is Mr. Haris Hamza, our Human Resources Minister. Mr. Harris was our Human Resources Minister from the year 2019. Previously, he was the CEO of Talent Corp, a government initiated corporation whose aim was to develop, identify, and nurture young talents in Malaysia. Other than that, he's also well known for his articulate speeches in the parliament regarding matters of economy, wealth, and prosperity. Moving on, we have Mr. Muhaimin, our economist of the day. He is the Deputy Director in Pemandu, the Performance Management and Delivery Unit. He previously headed the Department of Economics in University Malaya. He is involved in analyzing and developing economic forecasts, advising the government on economic matters, and also an independent director in a few public listed firms. Finally, we have Mr. Amir Adi, the President of Malaysian National Workers Union. He was a gold medalist in accounting and finance from MMU, and he is one of the main proponents in favor of the minimum wage. He also represented the lobby that pushed the government in setting up for the minimum wage. So, on to our topic today, minimum wage, a boon or bane. In these days, there have been rising talks of inequality, rising inequality that has ripped the world apart. The rich has grown richer, the poor has grown poorer. This is what a lot of people claim. As such, there have been a lot of advocates for this concept of minimum wage. Now, there had been growing frustrations both among public and also government servants in talks of a proper policy on minimum wage. Our discussion today is simple. Is the minimum wage a boon or bane for people today? So, coming over to you, Mr. Harris, our Human Resources Minister. What is the political ramification of setting up a minimum wage in our country? Over to you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Mohammed Haris, and I am the Human Resource Minister. As you all know, the government has implemented the new minimum wage in Malaysia, increased to 1,200 per month in 2020 from 1,100 in 2019, with a hope to help take some burden off the shoulders of both employees and employers as well as fulfill their needs. Okay, minimum wage and their increases have extensive appeal to the general public and hence to politicians who rely on the public for their votes. Nevertheless, good politics doesn't not mean good economics. In most countries around the world, voters support rises in minimum wage. In the UK, a poll in January 2014 found 66% favoring a substantial increase in minimum wage, with majorities among supporters of all main political parties. In some places, this political pressure will almost certainly lead to much higher minimum wage than we have seen in recent experience. Okay, the minimum wage is designed to create minimum standard of living to protect the health and well-being of employees. When employees' well-being is taken care of, their productivity will increase as they do not have to spend their life worrying about their health and not go broke. On that account, we, the government, owes it to the poor workers to revise the minimum wages urgently to make up for decades of abuse by paying unfair and low wage. That's all from me.
Well, well, that was indeed very insightful from you, Mr. Harris. Uh, Moving on, Mr. Muhaimin, what is your take? Our question for you is: in the world of today, is the minimum wage really necessary? There have been many arguments on both sides, but we would like to hear your opinion on it. Over to you.
Hi, my name is Moimin and I am an economist. In economic, we suggest that minimum wage is not necessary and bad idea because it will affect the economy. It works best if wages are set by supply and demand and not by any other factor, for example, like government rules. So let's say if I've set minimum wage for the entire country. Let's say if I increase the minimum wage for 15 ringgit per hour, it will lead two things. It will kill jobs. The second, the minimum wage will hurt the people that we most wanted to help. For my first point, which is it will kill jobs, one of the basic lessons of economics is that when the price of something goes up, people will buy less of it. For example, if the price of chocolate smoothie rises, you expect consumers to buy fewer of them. This law of demand also affects the market for low-skilled workers. Raising the minimum wage means a higher cost of employing each worker, which makes worker less affordable than before. For example, like our coffee shop. Our coffee shop won't keep a worker at a mandated 15 ringgit per hour if that worker effects only result in 7 ringgit per hour in added revenue. Over the course of the year, a shop that keeps such worker for full time would lose about 15,000 ringgit. So instead, it will eliminate that job, and evidence shows that employers, in fact, do respond in this way to minimum wage hikes. By mandating a minimum wage, the government basically harming the employers and workers and hurting the economy's productivity to boot. Recent research shows that about 1.4 million jobs were destroyed in the late 2000s. For the worst, those jobs losses were probably suffered by the people who need jobs the most. This fact brings us to the second point, which is the minimum wage actually hurts the people we most want to help. When the minimum wage rises, the workers fired first and the ones hired the last are those who employ to be judged the least productive. In artificial locates more money than economy naturally permits to the last productive employers. This is brutal reality. So those who are most disadvantages, for example, like immigrants, tend to suffer the most job losses. And this reality is compounded by the fact that raising minimum wage causes more competition for jobs. In short, or to summarize all things up, the minimum wage generates so much angst because it goes right to the heart of how one views the free market. If the minimum wage is a good policy, it will appends all the traditional economic theory. So that's all from me.
Well, that was indeed a very insightful explanation on the economics of minimum wage coming from Mr. Muhammad. That was indeed enlightening. Moving on. So the talks of minimum wage usually involve workers, and it's usually categorized as a debate between livelihood and income. So, I'm going to now refer to our president of the Workers' Union, Malaysian National Workers' Union, Mr. Amir. So, Mr. Amir, my question to you is simple. Is the minimum wage of 1,200 ringgit really justified in the world of today? Over to you.
Yes, hi, my name is Amir Edi Adlan bin Sanusi. I'm the president of Malaysia National Workers Union. For the question, I think it depends on the workers' liability, such as the places they are staying. Are they staying near the town where the rent and cost of living is quite expensive than staying outside of town? Do they have families that they need to support? To me, it wouldn't be a problem for a young person that just finished high school because they don't have much responsibilities like older people that have a family to be fed. It will be a struggle for the older folks that need to feed and support their family because of the high cost of living in most places in Malaysia nowadays. So I think it is pretty subjective. That's all from me.
Well, that was a very good point coming up from Mr. Amir that the economics of the minimum wage is indeed a very subjective issue. It's not something which can be seen through a very objective lens. So, coming back to you, our Human Resources Minister, Mr. Harris, what is the role that minimum wage plays in the plans of Malaysia to become a high income nation? There have been talks of increasing our national per capita income and all sorts of policy discussions on this. But what is your take and what is the role of minimum wages in this? Over to you.
Okay, for these past few years, everyone has been suffering from low minimum wage as cost of living in Malaysia is continuously increasing. Minimum wage legislation tends to be rationalized as an anti-poverty device. So people who work full-time should not live in poverty. So the role of minimum wage when increased is to let citizens have more purchasing powers. When citizens have higher purchasing power, businesses will increase their profits and contribute to our country's GDP due to increased spending. Therefore, our economy will thrive because of higher growth in multiple industries. Furthermore, our country will attract more great talents when minimum wage is increased. Nowadays, a lot of talented young people prefer to work overseas due to better pay and benefits. Therefore, the government should consider increasing the minimum wage in order to help industries strive with a great workforce. Finally, when companies in our country start to offer more attractive wages to those who can bring a lot of value, employees with children can have more money to have a proper lifestyle and spend on their children's education. Thus, will indirectly bring more quality talents to the workforce in the next generation. That's all.
Well, thank you, Mr. Harris. You brought up concepts of how the minimum wage plays into increasing our national income. So, okay, moving on. My question to Mr. Amir. So, there have been always talks about minimum wage, where this is supposedly a discussion between the have-nots and the haves, where the rich gets too rich and the poor gets too poor. So, I'm asking you this: would you prefer an increase in minimum wages or limit on maximum income of the top management in companies? We all know of the superficial director, the CEO of a top flying company. He rides a private plane and things like that. So, the question is simple: do you want a limit on the maximum income you can earn, or do you want an increase in the minimum income you can earn? Over to you.
To me, I would prefer to increase the minimum wage because by doing so, it will reduce our rate of poverty. It will also help family to support their children. Furthermore, raising the minimum wage will have positive effect on the economy. Research have been made that having a higher minimum wage is not the cause of high unemployment rate. And also, I would like to suggest that government should also make sure that other benefits provide a full package for low-wage workers and their families as well, as they will also need to access the affordable and quality healthcare. Thank you. That's all.
Well, thank you, Mr. Amir, for your insightful opinions. Right over here, I have some questions from our audience. So, first of all, this is actually directed towards our HR minister. So, to you, Mr. Harris, do foreign workers too deserve the minimum wage?
Okay, the government believes that foreign workers also deserve to get their minimum wage raised. We, the Human Resource Ministry, has been urged to stop the slogan, any job is better than no job. Consequently, we should look at ways to further raise minimum wage to attract Malaysians to take up jobs that are deemed dangerous and demeaning. Before efforts were being made, government policies have managed to keep the wage for these jobs low so that they can reap high profits at the expense of these miserably paid workers, who are mainly made up of migrant labor. The employers have taken advantage of the poor foreign workers who are at the mercy of Malaysian bosses for their unfortunate survival. In order to solve the situation, the government strives to prevent Malaysia from ending up as dumping ground for foreign workers when employers decide not to take care of their employees. So to conclude my answer to your question, foreign workers deserve to get their minimum wage raised, as their race doesn't determine their worth as human beings. With low wages, it will be hard for them to survive and feed their poor families, who are thousands miles away from them. These workers should also be given the same right as normal workers and not be mentally tortured by their fellow employers. I hope that government can take its gear 6 towards defending these foreign workers' rights, besides making sure that they can have the opportunity to live a more prosperous life with their raised minimum wage. Thank you.
Well, that was indeed a commendable explanation. You spoke about rights of immigrant workers and all. So, well, here's another question about rights, actually. Well, this is directed towards Mr. Amir. Must young workers be paid the minimum wage? Over to you, Mr. Amir.
To me, the wage should be given based on what level of qualification does the young worker has. The higher the level, the higher the wage should be for them, and vice versa. If he or she does not have any qualification, then they should be paid the minimum wage, which is 1,200 ringgit. Over to you.
Okay, thanks. That was actually you brought up a point about if young workers don't have workers, they deserve the minimum wage. So theoretically, individual could be earning the at the minimum 1,200 ringgit, regardless of his skills or his value. So that was essentially what you brought, I presume. So moving on to Mr. Muhaimin, we have a question for you from the audience. How will raising the minimum wage affect poverty for low-income workers?
In my opinion, raising the minimum wage may or may not reduce poverty majorly in most developing countries, but it does not guarantee it. If somehow it will reduce poverty, the impact is modest because the minimum wage applies to only a minority of poor workers. In particular, it does not cover workers in the large informal sectors. Raising the minimum wage creates losers as well as winners among poor households, depending on employment effects, the wage distribution, and the effects on the household had pulling some out of poverty, while at the same time pushing others in. So, in short, raising the minimum wage could be part of comprehensive poverty reduction package, but it cannot or should not be the only or even the main idea or tool to reduce poverty. So I think that's my conclusion on that.
Well, seems like we have come to the end of our panel discussion. So I hope our audience and our viewers have developed their own opinions regarding the minimum wage and whether it's a boon or bane for people. So I hope this panel discussion had enlightened and broadened your views regarding this minimum wage, and we all hope for the best in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.